real. So.
Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to Psychosec. Can I answer any questions?
What is it all about?
Well, we're a company that produces 100% organic human sleeves. You're probably wondering what's a human sleeve. Well, if you gather around, I can let you know what we do here in full details. So here at Psychosec, we've been able to achieve true immortality by taking your human consciousness and storing it on a device called a cortical stack. It's implanted in the base of your neck, and it collects and stores everything that makes you you. Every memory, every emotion, every sensation, everything you've ever experienced gets stored on this little device. You can see it here on the screen that's about to come up. You guys just follow me. All the information is stored on this device and can be digitally transferred from one sleeve that you currently occupy into the sleeve of your choosing.
Sleeves are basically human bodies we grow in our labs. They're organically real. Bones, tissue, organs, everything. These are the best bodies you'll ever have, period. Nothing can hurt these bodies, but they are human. So if something were to happen to them, you can always change them out for a new one. That's why it says immortality becomes non-existent. Because you can be 50 in one body and change to your next body. You're as young as you feel. If you come this way, David's going to show you some 2018 models that you can choose from.
Well, you can choose which sleeve you desire. Now you can either have the sleeve that you have right now, or we have a selection of wonderful sleeves that we have made through Psychosec, fully genuine and organic produced. Now if you'd like to be taller, shorter, skinnier, if you'd like to have better vision, maybe strength in your body, you have the choice to choose a man or a woman's sleeve. Now if your sleeve becomes damaged or too old for your liking, simply remove from the cortical stack your DHF, your consciousness, to another, newer sleeve.
Hello, Patriots. Today I have the highlights from Gene Decode's interview on the Nicholas Veneman Show. He discusses the topic of clones, and he goes into the types of clones, a little bit of history, how clones are made, and I've also included some examples for you as he talks. At the end of the video, we have Donald Marshall discussing the infamous Vril lizard type of clone. So I hope you enjoy it, and with that said, here we go.
Well, I go depending on the person, always when I red pill. So if I'm talking to them and I get into that subject one way or another, I see where they're at. So if they're thinking you can't clone at all, it's never been done, I go to the history of cloning. So bacteria was cloned, way back in shortly after they found out about, DNA. They actually started cloning bacteria. And then, of course, there's Dolly the sheep that was cloned. And, people can look that up very easily and see that they cloned Dolly. If you give me a screen share, I can actually pull that up really quick and just show a little thing on that. So here, just duck, go. Dolly, this cloning Dolly sheep. So Dolly the sheep, since 1996, when Dolly was born, the other sheep, they clone from adult cells. They've also done that with cats, rabbits, horses, dogs, pigs, goats, cattle, etc. Mouse, 2004, was cloned using a nucleus of the cell. And then you can go read the article there. Just click on that. There's the article about cloning Dolly the sheep. And then furthermore, you can go look into other cloning that they've done through here. And so you can also go to Clone and Cloning, the history of cloning. All I did is put history of cloning in. 1958, cloning began. 1964, cloning of animal cells. They've already gotten down to where they're cloning it here in Japan from cells found in cow's milk. And so, obviously this has been coming a long time. It's not something brand spanking new. And then most people are familiar with the movie, The Boys from Brazil. Actually, a lot of movies are just the deep state revealing it so that if the information comes out, they can just say, that's a movie, that's not real. But that was real. The clone 90, I think it was 94, 96, somewhere in there, one of those two. You can read this article, it's in here. Copies of Hitler and put them in families, 94. So into situations and then killed, the certain people that Hitler lost in his life, primary people, so that they would have the same environment growing up. And so this is, going into The Boys from Brazil in that movie. The actors, here's the cast, and that going into that cloning situation. So, you can look up how Dolly and all that was cloned, and all of that information is very, very easy to find. And then another thing I'll go into, if they're seeming to be pretty wide open about it, is I'll talk about the different types of clones. So a lot of people are familiar with the situation and where one of our presidents went to China and he threw up on the premier of China because he was a type of clone that's known as a robotoid that they make at Bethesda in Maryland, where they put somebody in a booth that hits them with a low-level particle beam that it just passes through, and it analyzes their genetics, and it downloads all of their memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything. And then it puts that on a hard drive or a floppy, and then they take the person out, and the particle beam is upped in power, and it literally, almost like Star Trek, beaming, but you're not beaming anybody. You're literally from energy creating a matter copy. And those copies, of course, don't have an internal power supply. So they, like in the movie Tron, they start to de-res over time. And so they have to go back to Camp David on a regular basis to get recharged. And so in the situation where that president was visiting and he threw up, it was because during his speech, and that's why you see now presidents have two items on each side of them. It's to keep this from happening, to reflect those beams, that they hit him with a sonic beam that was at his resonant frequency, which would have killed him. But because he was a robotoid type clone, he was starting to de-res. His frequency was dropped down, so it made him very ill. So later he threw up, and then at the meal, he slid under the table. I'm pretty sure it was China. Might have been Japan. I may be slightly off and stole a little bit out of it because of the shedding. I'm pretty sure it was China. And then go into the next type of clone that Donald Marshall goes into, which is Vril. And Vril were found when they were making the domes, and especially the maglevs, and going through all the old tunnels and mine shafts. They use a lot of mining areas and a lot of the old mines and old tunnels and things. They found this little tiny, about 2 to 3 foot type of lizard kind of creature, reptile. And on top of its head, it had a proboscis. And one of the people that was involved, one of them got on his face and injected down his optic nerve some materials. And those materials went into the person's brain, and he died. But he came back to life, a little over a week later, but he was different. And what had happened is the Vril, kind of like the old movie Pod People, except in this case, it literally reanimated him and took over his personality, his memories and everything. But and this is the case with Biden, Smokey Joe, in which for about 2 or 3 years, it has full access to the memories, but it's only running on the first 4 energy centers, which is, it's not running on the heart center, though. It's running on the root center, the dantian, the solar plexus center, and the will. So it's able to control it, the person, for 2 to 3 years. And then it starts losing control and it starts losing access to the memory. And in that point, the person looks exactly like someone getting dementia and Alzheimer's, where they start forgetting where they're at, forgetting how to say, words, how to remember things, even who's there. Like with Smokey Joe, when he's running, he introduced his daughter as his wife, and I'm running for Congress, all kinds of crazy stuff we all remember. And it gets worse and worse and worse until eventually the person dies from it, just like with Alzheimer's dementia situation. Same situation, but they forget how to even the bodily functions, and the vril loses control. Then the next type is, of course, the type like Dolly the sheep, where they use cellular tissue. And then now the last type is where they can literally get any cellular tissue, erase the DNA, and pass through somebody else. And this is David Wilcock went into this, where Louis T. Montagnier actually did an experiment where he passed laser light through a frog cell into a salamander, I believe it was. And when the egg into the egg of a salamander, and when the egg came out, it was a frog. And so they can actually rewrite the DNA by passing it from one cell to another. And they'll actually make it easier by erasing the nuclear information in the cellular, nucleus. And that's why you saw in that Dolly the sheep, they were going into the nucleus, because they were looking at doing this, where they could just pass a frequency through somebody into some stem cells that have had the genetic code erased and make a copy of the person. And the problem they have with the clones is that, and this is why they have research in several of the DUMBs that they used to have in California and out in also in Nevada, in the area, Dugway Proving Ground areas, and those. They're researching chromosomes, certain chromosomes like 51, 52, 26, 27, 21, etc., because the clones aren't absolutely identical. Like if a person has non-attached earlobes, they would wind up having attached earlobes, or the eyes might be a little off. Certain, memories might be missing. And so they're trying to get it, absolutely identical, but they have not gotten to that point, like we saw with Jeffrey Epstein, where the person later that they showed that was on the dead person wasn't identical to the pictures of him when he was alive, because that wasn't really him that was killed. It was a clone that was killed. And so it's a close enough thing that the average person, not knowing this stuff, not looking for it, won't catch it. But it's not close enough for those of us who know.
Right. We understand that cloning and vrils are slightly different, because they can take your blood and they can clone you in the cloning centers. And the people that are managing the cloning centers, from the information that I found, were people that have been body snatched by the lizards, if you like, and they have moved their own consciousness into the human body, but killing the human consciousness in that human body. And that's why we see, pedophiles and human trafficking, and people think, well, how can humans do this? Well, it's because their consciousness is not human. It's they're parasites, they're lizards that have moved their consciousness into these beings, and they have no empathy, and they're just very, very good at faking empathy. What are your thoughts on that? Exactly.
It's 2 reasons. In the Vril situation, like I said, the heart center is skipped. The energy center, the little computer ball of fiber optics that conduct ultraviolet light, the acupuncture meridians, come together in balls that are little like servers in our body. The Hindus and the ancient Indians could observe them, and they spin. So they call them chakras, which is a term in Hindu, I believe, that means spinning wheel. And so these spinning wheels, they could see the light and the energy spinning in them in different colors and frequencies. There's different variations depending on the location. Well, the vril doesn't activate the heart because it doesn't want empathy. It wants to control the person and not have any of their memories, their cellular memories, the unconscious interfere so that it could, it can make the being, that it's now controlling do anything it wants. Additionally, when a person dies, of course, the soul leaves. So now in the vril and all the other situations too, a clone doesn't have a soul. From my information, when they do that, a soul doesn't come in there. So that is our moral center. Is our soul is what gives us the feeling of what's right and wrong and being kind and considerate and, have some empathy and respect for others. Without that, you're a sociopath or a psychopath, more often a psychopath. And so that's another thing that you can tell, because with psychopaths in Japanese, the term is sympatiku eye, where if you look at a person's eye, like I look at your eyes right now, and I can only see the whites of your eyes on the right and the left side of your iris. And so I don't see white on the bottom. I don't see three whites. And sympatiku eye, the three whites is a sociopath. Four whites, like you see with Shifty Schiff, that's a psychopath. And so if you look at some of the worst killers, we've known, and the mass murders and those things, you'll see four whites where you see white and their eyes don't have to be that wide open. And it literally over time, it looks like their eyes are starting to bug out of their head because they're getting, the no empathy. And the way it is, it actually causes the structure of the eye to change to where you see four whites. You see white all around the eye, the color of the eye, the iris.
Wow. Well, very interesting. And why are these lizards, you mentioned 2 to 3 foot lizards. Where do they come from and how did they get here?
From my understanding, they're actually indigenous and they live beneath the earth in tunnels and little caves and caverns and that. And they discovered them with Project Mark Rand, which is the big project to make all the dumbs and all this. Miners and things, of course, knew about them a long time ago and were careful because there has been situations, cave-ins, et cetera, like mining, where they get trapped and somebody gets knocked out and a vril lizard comes over the person, while they're unconscious. And, the person dies and they haul the body out. And then later the person reanimates. And of course, somebody's been dead and then they reanimate, back then they usually would burn the person because they realized that they've been possessed. So now, the cabal uses that so that they have a copy that will have no empathy, no compassion, and be able to serve them in how they want.
Let's talk about cloning and how they clone a person or a celebrity, because it happens a lot in celebrities and they're controlled. Well, that's why we look at them and they look really not there. They torture them if they don't comply. And then they kill them in the clone body, and then they move their consciousness into another clone body and they repeat the same situation. So it's endless murder, endless torture for that same person and endless bodies. What are your thoughts about that? If you could explain that to us, please, Gene.
Well, depends on the person. If they're, knowing they're going to become extremely famous, they keep the original in a cage in a dump. Because if you keep copying a copy, you get genetic fading. Just like in an old VCR tape or a cassette tape, and you would make a copy and then your friend would make a copy from the copy he got from you, and then on and on and on. Pretty soon you don't have video. 8 copies down, you don't even have audio anymore. Same thing happens with genetic copying. It's called genetic drift, where you get drift and you get fading to where it's no longer viable. And so if they know they're going to need to make many, many, many copies, they will keep the original in a cage, and the original is quantumly entangled to the clone. So it is aware and experiencing everything that the clone is getting and having. And so there's Bernie Mac and a bunch of the African-American gentlemen were, I don't have, able to pull it up right now because I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but they were riding in a limo and talking about this and saying, well, if I'm the clone, I'm going to enjoy my wife and this and that. And I consider all of what I have mine. And, but the original is, that may have been originally the originals. And so these stars, when they sign on the line, they sign away their soul, they get cloned also. They don't even know that was part of the deal. But they get taken down to these cloning centers and they live out their life in a cage while the clones are being them. So, this is always the case with the high level people within the media and the high level, with very few exceptions. There are a few minor exceptions of Alliance personnel now and some people a long time ago that got around this, and then politicians as well that are run by the cabal. And then people who get really, really famous. It's wise to have security and people around you if you go out in public. One of the reasons I'm not allowed to go out in public much, in trying to keep who I am, because, I was going to go to some of these events where Flynn and all these people are talking, and they told me no way ever, because to grab somebody, put in a syringe, put them out, chloroform them, whatever, and have, you can already get at a previous meeting, get their DNA, have a clone ready to go. They anesthetize the person, take the original away, and literally in seconds, person goes in the bathroom, somebody else comes out. Literally in seconds, they're switched out. And most people don't realize it. And so you'll notice, because they don't have a soul, the person starts to change their behavior. They start to get less empathic, empathy. They have less empathy. And they get less scruples. They're willing to undermine you, to turn on you. They don't agree with you like they used to on major topics. I don't agree with things they were fine with you before. And that's, as that time goes on, it'll get worse and worse and worse. And, you'll lose best friends and you'll lose people, long-term associations, because you found out it's not the same person anymore. And a lot of the clones, they don't know they're even clones, but they've been switched out. And so, in these conferences and things like that, I don't go because there have been people within those that have been switched out. And, over long term, we can start noticing the way they talk and what they talk about and the things they say is no longer making sense, because the truth makes sense. It fits together. You hear one person talking about things, it fits in with things. If you do your research, it all fits together. But the lies, even though they're vast in their, they don't fit. It doesn't, like if you look at 911 and you look at the speed that the towers fell, it's not possible, because it's actually, in one case, faster than free fall. It's faster than a brick falling in a vacuum. Or in the atmosphere. You drop a brick, the building beat it down because it's being sucked down into its footprint by the nanothermite and the pyrotechnic. So it's being pulled faster than gravity can pull it in. So this collapsing and all this, like Building 7. That's why they say they're going to pull it. That's the term in demolitions. And so, the falling narrative, the lie of that doesn't fit. And of course, if you're looking, the lie that was planes in this, well, then why'd 7 come down? So if you're thinking logically and you say, well, this and this, certain things can't add up. It's just like we see with the jab, where, when I went to the dentist and I told the dental assistant, I had red pill both of them. I said, I hope you guys, winter's coming now. It's going to get really cold. So I hope you have a jacket and wear that when you go out, because I don't want to freeze to death. If you don't wear a jacket, I might freeze to death, because that's the same logic we see with the jab. If everybody has it and one person doesn't, everybody who has it is threatened by the other person who doesn't have it. Well, what's the point of it then? If it doesn't protect you from somebody who doesn't have it, doesn't protect you from getting variations and all kinds of other stuff, and it's not even stopping the original, supposedly. Why would you want to get it if there's all kinds of side effects? I mean, obviously you wouldn't. So the lies never mesh together. The truth always comes out if you're a rational, logically thinking, reasonably intelligent person and with an open mind. And the same thing goes when you're dealing with clones. As you've known that person a while, they start to not fit the pattern you're familiar with that person. Radical differences in their behavior, the things that they agree and don't agree with you, the way they in the relationship, they get way more aggressive, way less, like you said, they don't have any empathy.
So let's say now they've created a clone and they want to move that person's consciousness, from the original body into the clone. How do they do that?
They have had this technology, and it was actually, again, they always use long-range preconditioning. So the movies always show this. There was a original the original Star Trek series in which Captain Kirk and another doctor, a lady, went into a machine they found on another planet. She took him unconscious and switched her consciousness with his, so that she was in his body and he was in hers. And so they've had this ability to switch consciousness from body to body. They can switch one and the other at the same time, or they can have, a body, the clone body, and take the consciousness and move it. For them, it's immortality. And actually, originally, up until the after 1990s, I think it was 1997, the portals they were using in the space program actually did not transfer the body. It cloned the body. It made a copy. It disintegrated the body at one side and then recomposed a new body from energy into matter, and then transferred the consciousness through the portal. What was the only thing really going through was information and the energy. So there was no actual transfer of changing the matter of the body into energy, transferring it to the other side, reassembling it. They tore it apart and then reassembled a new one at the other end. And the consciousness, which is energy, was transferred into the new body, but it didn't have a clone. It didn't have a soul. So now again, it's a clone. It's another type of clone. It's a portal clone. Kind of like the Robotoid clones, pretty much the same thing. It's essentially a Robotoid, but it has no soul now. And so up until the late 90s, all the people in the space programs, they found that out. And then they were like, wow, and there was a Twilight Zone in which the guy realized that's what was going to happen, and he wouldn't go through the portal. And so now they've upgraded the portals where it's actually, like in Star Trek, I don't want to have my atoms torn apart, thrown across space, reassembled at the other end. That's now what it does.
If you could please explain, Gene, what's the difference between a clone and a vril?
Well, again, a clone is actually a copy of the body, and the consciousness moved into it, or it's just copied. And when you clone, all of the memories can be uploaded onto computer systems and downloaded into the new body. So it's a copy. In the case of the vril, the body's not copied. The consciousness, the soul, and the original person dies and leaves, and the vril takes over the body and reanimates it. So the body is the original, but what's in there, the person that you may have known, that could have been your friend or a politician or somebody like this, like Smokey Joe, that's not the original Smokey Joe. That's the consciousness and the energy structure and some of the actual genetic material of a lizard creature thing.
Do you think that the original Sleepy Joe back 10 years ago, for instance, was a vril?
Not 10 years ago, no. But if you look at pictures of him back then, this is like really bizarre, because you look at, pictures of who we have now and who we had then, they're not the same. So the vril took over a clone. So you have a vril clone, a real clone that's been vrilled. So now we got a double whammy here.
Wow. So let's talk about, for an example, if they were to take your blood and they were to clone you, can they explain how that clone will be as old as from when the blood was conceived, and how it would look? How old can they get it?
Well, with the space, program's technology, not only can they reverse age somebody, they can forward age somebody. So they can take the clone, it would be a baby when it first is born, and they can forward the age very, very quickly in a matter of weeks, get it to any age they want it to be. So if they're cloning somebody who's in their 70s or 50s or 30s, they can, in a matter of weeks, get the clone to that correct age.
Right. Do you think that Michael Jackson changed himself so much to protect himself from being cloned?
I would agree with that, yes.
Right, interesting. Now, when a vril or a reptile body snatches a human and takes over that human, which becomes a drone human or a vril, what happens to that? What happens to the vril's human family, mom and dad? Do they then continue the body snatching with their family, or what happens?
Depends on the importance of the individual and their surrounding family. Usually they just do, in the case, they just do the person they need, because the cabal is all about being economically efficient. So they're not going to spend resources where they don't need to. Especially, the Alpha Draco before they left, that's why they left, because it was getting too economically infeasible. The investment was becoming too high for the gains. And so now the remaining few negative groups are the Omicron, for example, and a few others, but the majority are gone now and been cleansed off them. And so, with the clones, they don't normally spend money where they don't need to spend money. They're very conscious. And on Michael Jackson, he actually did, from my information, die in the commercial. He burned to death. And so they actually were able to, with the space technology, repair him completely. But at that point, he said he didn't want to be in public anymore. So from there, the Alliance actually put out Clone. And the clone being quantumly entangled is a lot why the changes in the facial structure, the lightening of the skin, the nose falling off, things like that, because it's quantumly tied to the original. And the original still had some so badly damaged. The genetics were damaged that even when they brought him back, there were still some issues.
So let's assume that's correct for argument's sake. And that after that point, it was a clone. Michael Jackson was a clone.
The one we see in public.
The one we see in public. Then whose consciousness is inside of that clone?
In the case of the Alliance, what they do when they use a clone is the person is trained in how to soul project. And so the person will project this, the body, the original body will be protected so that, they're by leaving enough of their soul energy in there to protect them. And also there's protection technologies that they can use to help keep the person protected. So there's enough soul in there to protect it from being possessed. And they'll project enough soul into the clone that clone has compassion and understanding and, knowing all of what's going on. The Alliance doesn't do it like the Cabal, where the clone has no soul at all in it.
I'm convinced Michael Jackson was empathetic, and also because the deep state didn't like him for various reasons. And he was, when they framed him for pedophilia, it was all over the media. Whereas with the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, we see nothing on the media. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's exactly because he was helped by the Alliance. So he's projecting into soul into the clone so that it's going to have the same exact personality, same exact behavior, same exact emotion, same exact empathy, everything right down the line. The Cabal is drastically impaired, but it's not incapable still of producing more. They have a lot. They had many facilities. Yeah, they've lost the majority of their major domes in the U.S. They're losing a lot in Canada. That's why there's a huge thing with now many of the major dumps are run on nuclear power. And so the flooding was done in Canada, weather warfare, to flood out the dumps. But unfortunately, they lost containment on the reactor. It flooded the reactor. And so there's a lot of radiation. And so people need to do radiation protocols in those areas. You can go online and find the monitoring stations and see what the levels are where you live. If you're in those level areas where the levels are high, you want to go to the NIH, the National Institute of Health. They have protocols for using iodine for treating yourself. I wouldn't recommend going and running away because right now Canada's borders are locked down. You can't. But additionally, there's many more that may be happening. So, if you can get out of ways from the affected area would be wise. But then additionally, it would be important to use I would say not iodine, but potassium iodide, the Magellan's Direct, and make up the appropriate solution based on the NIH documents so that you can do the radiation protocols which are very viable and very powerful. It's very important that people do that because in affected areas. So, a lot of these dumps are being taken out, and there are, always in war, there's casualty situations. That's a casualty situation that people need to deal with, but they still do have, other facilities. There had so many because they do it everywhere, all over the world. The cabal's all over the world. And so they have facilities still.
Now, recently there was on the news that Britney Spears was freed, and I'm not convinced that was the real story. And I've heard that she's also been a victim of cloning. Do you want to tell us what you know about Britney Spears?
Yeah, I still need to research to see if that's the original that got her out of the cage on the dump, because you have the original, then you have the clone, and then of course they Mark Ultra'd all of them. So it's like, which is which?
Right, I see. Absolutely.
They come up from underground different spots all over the world. There's a 1 to 1.5 foot tall one. That's the real type 1.
The type 1s are covered in red diamond shaped scales. Real type 1s are real dumb.
Little dragons, those are the Brill type 1. These lizards have a unique biological property of their bodies.
The lizards have what's called a proboscis.
It's an ejectable brain and spinal column.
The small ones they use to drone people because the proboscis on young lizard type 1s, they're small enough to go into an eye and not ruin the eye.
This top cap thing on the top of their head comes out. They can do this once in their life. It pulls their spinal column along with it. The humans would have to be restrained or unconscious.
The thing squiggles in through the eye. It does a spiral around the optic nerve all the way to a certain point, and it's driven there by taste. And they said once it gets there, it has the taste of butterscotch. It then starts what they call spinning. The spinal cord stuff comes out of the spinal cord, and it's everything that the lizard is. The lizard's whole body is dead, and it can't go back in. It's one way.
The juice that's in the spinal cord gets excreted out of the tip of this thing. They're parasitic cells. The parasitic cells go into the brain.
The old person's consciousness is gone. The body is absolutely, totally dominated, and the lizard is smarter as a human. Over time, it'll develop a rash, it'll lose its hair.
And they're actually deficient. They're dumber than the original person.
And they mimic human behavior, and it knows that its life is dependent on it mimicking human behavior, so it does really well. Even with other animals, it's smart enough to instinctually mimic the animal's behavior. The drones of 100 years ago erased any existence of these real lizards from Egyptian carvings on walls. They would smash them, or books that had anything in them about them, they would burn them.
Patriots, I just wanted to say thank you to all of those who've been supporting my channel. I really do appreciate it. I couldn't do it without you. And I have a new payment platform called Stripe if you are interested in supporting the channel with a donation. And thank you again, and I'll see you on the next video.